My name is, I hesitate because when I came here, my name was Stephanie Brown. And a couple years later, and students got to know me on the schedule as Stephanie Brown. And then a few years later, I got divorced. And my name, I went back to my maiden name, which is Stephanie Dell'Agnese, or anglicized Stephanie Dell'Agnese. And students who were looking for me couldn't find me on the schedule. Oh, so then the students were able to get that. And then I got married again some years later, and my name became Brandon. And the students then couldn't find me on the schedule. So Susan Salowitz, the registrar, was able to manipulate everything so that my legal name was Brandon, and my insurance and all that kind of stuff, my paychecks were all that. But on the schedule only, I could be Dell'Agnese so the students could find me. I don't know why I wanted them to find me.
And what year did you arrive here?
71.
And can you tell us a little bit about your family, like where you're from, like what your parents did and everything?
I'm from the city.
City.
Oh, the city. I grew up in Manhattan. That's the only city. And
What part of Manhattan?
I grew up downtown in a development called Stuyvesant Town, was built for the GIs after World War II. That's how old I am. And my father, in those days, my mother didn't work. She was mother. And my father worked at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. He was an immigrant. He was of Italian and Austrian descent. And he'd lived all over Europe before he came to the United States. So English was his last language. He spoke 7 languages, was fluent in all of them, could read and write all those languages. And by way of the British Embassy in Washington, he was an assistant to the ambassador. He came to the Waldorf in New York and was useful to them both for foreign protocols and his language ability. And then he stayed there and worked
So obviously
there.
he was from the northern reaches of Italy if he was part Austrian.
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
What was your schooling like?
Well, I went to parochial school in downtown Manhattan, and then to high school I went to the Convent of the Sacred Heart, which was one of those fancy private schools. And I was an only child, so my parents could afford to send me there. And I had a miserable time. I was intimidated by the wealth and abilities of the students who had been there from K through 8. And, but the education I got was really good. I dated a guy in Manhattan College while I was there, and we were using the same books and doing the same stuff. So I was well prepared for college.
Speaking of college, where did you go to college after
Well, I had a rather checkered college career. As an only child, I was young. I was the youngest one in my class all the way through school. So I was barely 17 when I went away to college. I was an only child. I was spoiled rotten, and I didn't like being away from Mommy and Daddy. And so after one semester, I came home, and I went
Where
to...
did you go?
What?
Where did
Oh,
you
I
go?
went to Immaculata,
Okay.
down the main line from Villanova.
Okay.
Had a good girls basketball team. And then I came home and I went to a private, it was sort of a finishing school, though I didn't know what that meant in those days. But anyway, run by the same nuns I had had in high school. And so we did that and finished there because I thought I better finish something. And then we moved to Connecticut permanently. And
Your whole family?
yeah, just my mom and dad and me. That's all the family I had. And I finished at Sacred Heart University in Bridgeport. And then I went for a graduate degree at UHA.
And what brought you to Connecticut? I mean, did your father stay at the
We
Waldorf?
spent our summers in Connecticut.
Okay.
And when I was about 19, my mother and I always wanted to live here. When I was about 19, we decided we'd move up. My father kind of semi-retired into a consultant position at the hotel. And in the beginning, he came weekends and used to take his summer vacation on Friday. So he'd come Thursday night and stay till Monday morning and go back. And so it was an easier schedule for him to manage. Because when famous people were coming in, if they were coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning, he got the job because he wasn't the uppity manager. He was just manager enough where he had to go and sit and greet them in their own language or show them to their rooms at 2 o'clock in the morning.
And where do you move to in Connecticut when you moved here?
Rowayton, which is a little part of Norwalk. It's a village within Norwalk, and it's between Darien and Norwalk.
So after college, can you tell us how you kind of ended up
Here?
at Middlesex?
Yeah, well, I finished my master's, and there was no real work for English teachers.
At Sacred Heart also?
No, at UHA,
Okay.
University of Hartford.
Okay.
And there was no real work for English teachers. So I was scrounging around, and my first part-time job, I got a part-time job at Sacred Heart for 1 year and a summer. And I heard about an opening at Middlesex, and I said, what the hell, I'll apply. Heck, I'll apply. And I got the job teaching, what did I teach? I taught 2 things, and one of them might have been speech, and I'd never taught it before. It ended up later on being one of my favorite things to teach, though.
And how did you hear about the job? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Yeah?
Yeah, I really don't. I mean, it's not like it was a newspaper ad. I'm not sure.
And do you remember your interview at all?
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that.
Okay, we were in CVH then, and we were in one of the buildings called Woodward Hall. My office ultimately was a maximum security cell. So if you closed the door, you couldn't get out again. You know, that would lock you in. And I was interviewed there by the chair of the department at the time, whose name is Bill Grady. He's still around. He'd be fun to interview. He became a lawyer and left the college in later years, but he's still in town. And he was the chair of the English, and he interviewed me and told me, and I was eager for a job, and it paid more than Sacred Heart, I think, at the time. And so I said, yes, and I'll figure out how to teach that.
Now, what caused you to get into teaching in the first place?
I went to graduate school only because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And while I was in graduate school, a little voice in my head said, you know, this literature is more important to you than just going to school. I mean, maybe you should be on the other side of the desk, because I had a great love of literature and language at the time, and it was important to me. So I thought, well, maybe I should be a teacher. I'm comfortable in the classroom, and it's kind of how I fell into it. And I was very lucky because I loved teaching.
So what were those first days of Middlesex like when you started teaching?
Oh boy. We operated, I'm sure you've heard this from others, but we operated out of Woodrow Wilson High School on Hunting Hill Avenue. And we couldn't get in till 3-ish. And there was still some kind of cafeteria service at that time, because we'd come in as early as we could, 2:33. We'd buy some coffee and we'd all gather in the cafeteria. And there were few faculty. I was part-time first semester. And there were very few faculty total. And we'd sit there, we all got to know each other, and we got to be friends. And we all operated pretty much in that building. There were other classes that went on at CVH, but a lot of the liberal arts and stuff where you just needed a classroom and not any special equipment was in the high school, and we were like a family then. And the people you've interviewed are all old friends of mine.
Speaking of friendships, what were some of the relationships you developed with your colleagues over those first couple of years?
Yes. We were all around the same age, too. We were all pretty young faculty. I can tell you that on Thursday nights, those of us who taught late, which would be till like 9:30 maybe, I'm not exactly remembering. We all went to a restaurant, now defunct, called the Coach and Four, where we all usually tanked a few down and had a good time. And we got to know each other personally. We also partied together on weekends, and so we all had a kind of a real friendship outside. It wasn't just professional relationship. Yeah, it was wonderful to be there. It was, I feel almost like a mother of the college. I'm old enough. Because it was a real fly-by-night deal where we kind of went into this high school and there were no real roots, and we were over at CVH and in really bad environment. They were kind of condemned buildings. And then we came here and we saw the college born. So it's like it was a child that grew up with us, you know, and how a mother feels about her, a grandmother about her grandchildren, and watching them grow. We got to see that happen and to become a real full-fledged place with a campus. It changed things in some good and some bad ways. But that was kind of fun, you know, not being a real college, being a kind of, I had a little house across the street where the administrators were. And the first registrar was in the basement, Tony. He was great. I wish Tony, I don't know where, I think he's in Florida maybe. Did you know Tony Burns? Yeah, he was a real...
Do you want to maybe elaborate a little bit on that sort of transition? Like you said, some good, some bad.
Yeah.
What was the transition like there?
Well, we knew we were going to have a broadcasting studio. I was English and humanities, so that's the part I know the best. But it wasn't ready when we finally came. I think we came 73. I was here 71, 72. In 72, I became full-time. And then 72, 73, sometime over that year, I think we came in. And the BC studio wasn't ready. It used to be up the hill. So we'd have just, I remember having a lit class in there that we team taught. And that was fun. We used to do team teaching and stuff. I did that with Victor. And that was a lot of fun. And I'm not looking at you, I'm looking at them because, anyway. And it just felt funny. It felt all formal. And now we've got a real office. We used to meet students in the cafe at the high school. And it's not really ready. And there was this big flood. We used to call it, well, I'm going to say it, you can cut it, right? The Brad Biggs Memorial Pond, because Dean Biggs was the guy who kind of oversaw, he was Dean of Administration, and he kind of oversaw the whole thing as we were having it built. And they screwed up with the founders. It was supposed to turn this way. And as a result, when it rained, there was a lot of water on the side of the hill where you come out that side of Founders. And so that's what we dubbed it. So there was stuff wrong, but you know, we just kind of all waited to see what was going to happen, you know, I think. It felt real different. We had to grow up and be responsible.
And what was it like teaching at CVH? You didn't talk about that yet.
I didn't teach in
you
CVH itself.
Okay.
I only taught in the high school.
Okay.
At CVH, though, we had our offices,
Right.
so if students wanted to come there, but it was not easy to find. And we had one big room in Woodward where we had our meetings, faculty and staff, PSA meetings, and that, yeah.
Wow. So you taught courses at the high school?
Yeah.
And you had your offices up there?
At
CVH.
Woodward, yeah, at CVH,
Wow, okay.
which is actually, I think, that way.
Now, as time went on, obviously technology improved. Like, how did you like adapt to technology, just like evolving over your career here?
Oh, yeah. I was pretty old when we were forced to go to computers, but it was all sort of a mystery, but I got it eventually. It changed how we did grades, you know, it changed everything. But we all caught on. Some of us more and better and easier than others.
Let me ask you something that we haven't asked people. How did the relationship change between the faculty and the administration once you were on this campus and you weren't
It
quite
was
as,
a little more formal.
yeah?
Yeah, not terribly so for the real old timers. For the people who were here in the late 60s and early 70s before we got here, those relationships never really changed. Those stayed pretty much the same, but those people gradually left the college and the new people came in. It was more formal. It was okay. I mean, we always, for a long time, we really all loved each other a lot, even though sometimes we got mad at each other, administrators and faculty, but we knew each other really well.
And what do you think made those relationships among the faculty before you guys transferred formally? What do you think made those relationships really authentic and really close with each other?
Some of it was the politics of the day, the commonality of understanding what a college education should mean. You could get a good college education in those days here if you took the right courses and the right teachers. You could get a really good, solid liberal arts basis to transfer, and a lot of our students transferred to very nice colleges. So we believed in that. We believed in education as a value for itself, not a way to get a job, but a way to change your mind. And that's the value of education, which is a kind of European model more than an American model of education. If you follow, yeah.
You mentioned students. I was curious as to, obviously, when you started, from what we've heard, the majority of students were sort of usually older, and that's still sort of the case to a certain extent, but how did the student body change over your time here?
When I think about the classes I had at that high school, I don't think they changed. We still had a mix of kids and adults when we were back without our own campus, and we had that same mix. However, it was nicer, no offense, to teach a couple of night classes because you got more adults. And I will say honestly that, and you can cut this if it's not good, but as an academic advisor, I used to counsel kids to leave because they didn't have, they really didn't, their parents were forcing them to come here. They didn't want to be here. And I'd say, go out and get a job with your buddy. You can't afford a place on your own with one, with your job, but get a couple of buddies, rent an apartment and work for a few years. And then see if you want to come to college, So,
And when did you become chair of the English department?
God. Yeah, let's see if I can remember. In 84, maybe 85. Yeah, and I became, I was,
more than just English.
oh yeah, I was division director for humanities, which was fine arts, BC, English. That's all, I think.
Foreign language.
Anything, John?
Foreign language.
Foreign language, of course, foreign language.
Once you started moving up in the ladder, do you think that had an effect on any relationships you had among your faculty?
No, thank God. No, not at all. I saw myself as an ombudsman to present the position of the, when I thought it was reasonable, the position of the administration to the faculty. And maybe oh, Mike, sorry. Maybe I knew, with access to the administration, would know more than the scuttlebutt on campus. And my position to the administration was to represent the faculty and their wishes, their gripes, and their values.
Now,
And there were some tricky times.
You said you were in charge of the hiring and
Well, I was and I wasn't. I was when we hired John, but
Can you tell us what the interviews were like for you, and what you look for?
we with the advent of affirmative action, as a policy, a government policy. We developed a new hiring system, and we would have a committee, a search committee, and we would review applications. Do you remember what the composition of the committee was? I can't remember, but there was certain different disciplines had to be represented, maybe people from other divisions too, like, anyway, and it made the whole thing more difficult.
Nothing compared to what it is right now.
Oh, God, yeah. And I can't say it made it worse or better. I understand, and I support affirmative action. But sometimes, you know, the more Byzantine the style, the more difficult it is. The most efficient form of government is a monarchy, but you've got to ensure benevolence or you're screwed, a benevolent monarchy. So democracy is a very fudgy, complicated form of government, but it's the best.
Now, you were here for Wheaton, Chapman, Hart, Gonzalez, Sullivan, and Nieves.
Yeah.
What was it like? Like, what were your?
Wait a minute, was Nieves? Yeah, Nieves was after Hart. I can't
Right,
remember.
yeah, Nieves was-
So it's
I mean, Hart was first, then
Wheaton,
Nieves.
Wheaton, Chapman,
Gonzalez, Sullivan,
Sullivan, Hart, and
Nieves,
and
and
Nieves.
a bunch of interims.
Yes, and a bunch of interims.
Like, what was it like? Like, what were they like as people?
Well, they were all different. They were all different. You probably have heard Wheaton was our sort of our daddy. He was strange too, and there were things we didn't like about him and things we did like about him. But in our old age, I'd say we all had a fondness for Phil Wheaton. And then Chapman was good. He was a very good president. He was fair, and yeah, I liked Bob Chapman. He was a good guy. Do you want to know who my favorite president was?
Sure.
Name's not on the list. It was the interim, Diane Williams.
And tell us a bit about him. We haven't heard that name.
About Diane?
Yeah.
She was brought in as a hit lady to clean the campus up, kind of, because we were known, I don't know if you want to put this in either, as the college that chewed up and spit out its presidents. And we thought with good cause, but others may not have thought so. And so they brought Diane in. She was president of Quinnebog until she retired. She's the best president I ever served under. She was honest and open. You always knew, completely transparent. If she made a decision, she told everybody why, and maybe you didn't like it, but you knew. You knew what was going on. There was no duplicity. And I liked that about her. And she was very fair, very fair. But she wanted to hold everybody to a high work standard. And I also admired that about her, too.
Yeah, that was between.
It was
the time
between
Layla
Layla
left
and
the time Hart came.
yeah, it was before Hart. That's right. And she served. I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Now, you retired in the early 2000s.
Mhm.
Was there a particular reason besides you're just kind of done with the whole thing? Or?
No, we got a good golden handshake. I spent 3 years before I finally retired running around to, a lot of my friends went in 97, and John Coggins was one. And I was running around saying, I don't know, should I retire? I don't know what to do. Tell me, help me. Is retirement good? You know, when I was, because I'm obviously a little ADD, and I didn't know how I'd be retired. But I was ready in 57 because I had spent that 3 years agonizing about it. And then a golden handshake came, so I was ready. Who was president then? Was it?
When?
No, it's not Sharon was
In
gone.
2004?
2003.
Nieves.
Nieves still, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because Nieves came in 2000, because Hart left in 2000. and
Yeah.
Nieves- Or 2001. No, I'm sorry, 2000 we had an interim, I guess that's when Diane came. And then Who was
No,
the
Diane
intro? No,
was
no,
here
no.
in the 90s,
It
mid-90s.
was Bob Miller, who was
Okay, yeah, he was nice too.
right, and then Nieves came in 2001, so, go ahead.
So then, now that you are retired, looking back on your career, what would you say some reflections are like? What are you most proud of looking back on it?
Let me tell you what gave me the most pleasure first. And this didn't happen all the time. But what a privilege it was to witness a big human change in a student. You know, that kind of entry into maturity, insight, adulthood, giving up old ways for new ones that seemed better and healthier. And when I got to know my students, every once in a while that would happen. I can think of women that happened to who were students of mine, and I would think, wow, I didn't do this, but boy, I got to watch it, you know, and those were those profound changes that can happen to a student, an adult or a youngster.
Now, obviously don't give their name, but can you like give us an example of like a person that like made you proud in that sense?
Yeah, there was one woman who was not a kid, younger than me, but not a kid, and who was tied into a bad marriage. And I hesitate to talk about this, but anyway, she found herself. Well, actually, I can think of another one too. She found herself and found a new life for herself. She left her husband and was much happier, much more independent, and that happened. That kind of story happened more than once to me.
Looking back, do you think there's anything you would have done different?
Never thought about that with my teaching. Yeah, I made mistakes. I would come down hard sometimes on the student. And I have a big mouth, you can probably tell that. And I often, I forgot my phone. And I would say things that I was sorry for after, but sometimes I could apologize. What do I regret? I don't know. I never thought of that question. What do I regret?
But before we end, do you have like any final comments about your experience here, or anything you could say?
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, it was. It was God, it can make me cry now. It was my first real job. It was my first full-time faculty job. I had been part-time for a while. I was damn lucky I fell into that job. There was an opening that came over the summer. I came part-time in the fall and was told that there would be an opening they planned to fill in January. And this is before a lot of the structures came in for hiring. And I got the job. And I was really happy. And I remember what it paid. It paid $10,071. That was full-time in 1972. And I was like below instructor. I was lecturer, I was hired at the bottom. But that seemed, 5 figures seemed very good to me in 1972. So.
How old were you at that time?
I was 26. Yeah, I was very young.
Okay, you got any more questions? All right, well, thank you very
What
much.
was the question? That wasn't the question, was it?
What?
The last question.
It was just if you had any comments. Like anything
Oh,
else you
comments.
wanted
No, it was wonderful. It's here I fell into my career, and a meaningful career. Gave meaning to my life.